It was actually the last thing on my mind. I've been teaching the Catholic faith and talking about human sexuality, marriage, theology of the body for probably, I would say, close to 20 years. And never once had I really hit on the subject of divorce. And so I do think it's kind of a God thing that suddenly it was placed in my path. I have some good Catholic friends, and one of those friends, in the course of our normal friendship conversations, she used to tell me occasionally stories about what I would call complications in her life due to the fact that her parents had been divorced when she was a little girl. And here she is, she's in her 40s, she's got 6 kids, she's happily married, a convert. And yet every now and then, this sort of sadness would come out when she would tell me different situations that she had to navigate, things that I was not familiar with because I never had to navigate them as a child of an intact family. And I thought, well, there's something here that's kind of an untapped pain that I want to explore a little bit because I've never known about it. I've never known that there are probably people walking around all around me who have this pain that's unresolved, and it's foreign to me. So I decided, I have a pretty big presence on my Facebook page, a social media presence. And so I decided, well, I'm just going to put out a question to my Facebook followers. I'm going to ask them if anyone who's an adult, now adult child of divorce wants to talk to me and maybe answer some questions. And so I got some interest with that. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to whip up, like off the top of my head, 8 questions. It turns out to be 8 questions that I use in the book. Just some things that I was curious about what they felt about certain situations in being the child of divorce. And so I asked again if anyone wanted to fill out this questionnaire for me. And it would be completely anonymous. Nobody had to give any identifying details, and I would never tell their secret. I got, probably in the first 2 days, I got about 100 people. I got what I consider to be an avalanche of pain, actually. And people saying, I would like to tell you. I would like to tell you my story. I'd like to fill out whatever you have. I want to speak. Almost all of them were desperate to be anonymous. Generally, they love their parents and they didn't want to do or say anything to hurt their parents. I started reading their answers and I was completely blown away. And there was a great diversity to the people who responded. They were male, female, abusive childhoods or abusive marriages, completely clean divorces. Some were Catholic, some weren't. In fact, growing up, a lot of them were not Catholic. Most of my Facebook followers do happen to be Catholic. But what I found was that the answers were so strikingly similar in so many ways, even considering the diversity of their situations, that I knew I had kind of tapped into something that was almost a universal and something very primal about marriage, about family, about what children need, and about the pain and the devastation of divorce. And so I was stunned. I mean, I couldn't believe it because I've been walking around all these years unencumbered by all these complications that other people around me have been walking around with, and I didn't know it. I just didn't know it. And I found that to be true, that a lot of the children of intact families don't really understand that there are sort of 2 worlds going on around us. And so when I started to read about their pain, and I started to realize they have been silent. There's nothing here that they're saying publicly. In fact, they quite often are giving another side of things when they're asked to speak publicly, or when their parents want to know how they've coped with the divorce. And usually it's like, oh, it's great. It was the best thing for the family and everybody's doing great. But you ask them anonymously and privately and they have quite a different response. Themes of isolation. Many of them felt completely alone in their feelings because they were told one thing. The narrative is, we're all going to be fine. Everything is great. This is a good thing. Children are resilient, of course. And so many of them started to feel a little bit crazy. Like, wait, I'm not happy with this. I'm not happy with this. I can't say that I'm not happy with this because that's not acceptable. It's not part of the narrative. And so many of them through childhood would act out, especially teen years, young adulthood, would act out because what do you do with all that pain? What do you do with it? You can't tell your parents you're hurt. You can't, nobody asks. So themes of isolation, themes of abandonment, a lot of these people go on to their own marriages in stark terror of either being abandoned or abandoning and leaving their own marriage because they never had a model of how to stay. And so you get some of the participants who are explaining how they would plan, even though they had a wonderful spouse, but they would plan for that day that either they would have to leave or that the spouse would up and run. And these would be just loops in their head. These just narratives would keep going. I've got to know what to do when it's over, when my marriage is over. And yet there was nothing wrong with their marriage. So there's some self-sabotage too with marriages. So in the divorce fantasy world that the culture has set up to kind of feed the sexual revolution and kind of keep those tenets completely intact, there are two options that we are given as a society and as children and as spouses. If you're in an unhappy marriage, your choice is either stay in a miserable marriage for the rest of your life, trapped, absolutely unhappy forever, or leave and get that happiness that you are promised in life, that you're supposed to have, that everyone deserves. So what they've done, what the culture has done, is set up a false dichotomy. It's either this miserable scenario or this escape into this happy, fulfilled experience that everyone is supposed to have. But it's a lie. There's a third option, and the third option is to stay in your marriage, to do your duty to your spouse and your children, and to work through the problems until things almost inevitably get better. I mean, they've done studies that say when people decide not to get divorced and they stay together, within a year or so, most couples are happy that they did not split up. But you never hear about any of that. The second that someone starts to describe their unhappiness to their friends or sadly even the church community, you have the voices saying, oh, you deserve better. You deserve to be happy. And don't worry, the kids will be fine. You can go on, you can find happiness with someone else. And what I found is first of all, it's a lie, because more often than not, second marriages, third marriages they fail at a greater rate than the first marriage. But that you leave behind this wake of destruction that not only affects your children in their childhoods, but through their adulthood, and then through their marriages, and then the next generation after that, the grandchildren are affected. And it's kind of, as many people have used the term, it's the gift that keeps on giving, or someone said it's the gift that keeps on taking. It never ends. It never ends. It might even end for the spouse, where the spouse is able to go on and kind of forget about the first marriage and find a measure of happiness with someone else. But it never, ever ends for the children of divorce. And that is what I think shocked me so much, because even I live and breathe the air, I live in this culture, and I guess I kind of assumed that that's really what happens. You get used to it, it's no big deal after a while, it's just who you are. And I forgot that everything still is broken, and everything still needs to be navigated up until someone's dying breath. Several of the participants, and even people who didn't participate but who contacted me afterwards, said that it wasn't until one of their parents actually physically died where they felt it's over, or a sense of some closure. And this could be decades after the divorce. And others said, almost identically, some of them, when their one parent would die, they got that news, and then they said, oh, I guess my parents aren't getting back together. And that was, again, decades later. And they even know it's ridiculous. Yeah, my parents were never going to get back together. But it is that primal desire. You were made from these two people. And when that is blown apart, your foundation, everything from there on in, the whole trajectory changes for you and your life. I have in the past, and I have a lot of regrets over my complicity, I guess, in some friends' divorces in the past, where I thought, well, this is really a terrible situation, and I don't want to see my friend suffer like this. So, it's all right, and probably she'll be able to get her annulment, and, and you think of the children, but you don't really think of the children, because really you're just concerned that your friend stops hurting. And especially we women do this a lot. We want our friends to feel happy. And you never think of the kids, except that, oh gosh, it's terrible for the kids, isn't that sad? But they'll be, they'll get used to it, it'll be fine, it'll be okay, they'll be okay. Because they have two parents who love them still, and and they're not fine. That's the thing I never knew. Because they don't talk about it. Again, and no one asks them either. I have participants in the book who are now in their 30s. They, in their teen years or young years, were diagnosed. They were diagnosed. They had all these behavioral problems. They had all these mental problems. And so these kids, so many of them are diagnosed, like you said, with ADHD and oppositional defiant disorder, bipolar disorder. One of them was diagnosed with bipolar. And they're cutting themselves, they have all these, they're acting out, they're promiscuous, they're suicidal, many of them, and they're mean, and sometimes they're nasty, or they do very antisocial things, and they get diagnosed. Now, in the diagnosis, no one ever considers that perhaps it's due to the fact that their entire foundation was just blown to smithereens. Oh no, it can't be that. It can't be that. It has to be that there's something wrong with that child. There's something mentally wrong with that child. There's something emotionally wrong with that child. What is it? What can we diagnose that child? Let's put the child on medication. But it's the child's fault. And then then I'm reading all of these now adult children, and I'm realizing they all had so many of these issues. And they can point to, especially now as adults, because maybe at the time they didn't even understand, why am I full of such self-loathing? Why am I so insecure? Why am I looking for love in all the wrong places? Why am I acting out violently against myself? Even a lot of that. And then they realize as they grow up, my family, my whole identity, even who I am, everything I knew about my life was blown apart. I had no say in it whatsoever, and I was expected to go along with it and think it's good. And no one, not even counselors, no one asked me about how I felt about it, or whether I had some thoughts that weren't so pleasant about what just happened to my life. The message that the kids get is that love can stop, that love, even though it was supposed to go on forever, ends when you're not happy anymore with the person. So that sets them up for a life of thinking, okay, I'm only lovable until I'm not, and then what happens? The idea also that conflict leads to permanent separation. So if conflict leads to permanent separation, you don't ever want to cause any conflict. So what happens to those types of kids? Those types of kids who just stuff everything. That's not healthy. Those are the cutters. Those are the ones you're going to get who implode. And then everybody's like, what's wrong with little Janie? Or what's wrong now? She's 30 and her life is, she's an alcoholic. Or so, and all of these things begin with the blow up of the family. And people will say, well, it's so much better that the kid would live in peace separately. rather than live in conflict, because that's what the real problem is. It's like 9 times out of 10, those kids would prefer that their parents stay together, even with some conflict, because there's still stability there. There's still a marriage there. There's still a family there. Once you start introducing divorce and other romantic relationships, no matter how bad things were in that marriage, nothing has changed. Nobody's fixed themselves. You now just have added a divorce to the complication of things, of life. So now you've got a divorce on top of an alcoholic, or on top of an emotionally abusive person, or on top of just an unhappy person. And now you're going to add new romantic partners to that, which introduces danger, of course, to children, because non-biological males, especially coming into someone's life, is a known danger. That danger goes up exponentially. And then there are subsequent divorces sometimes. And then you have the family that you've just been told you need to now learn to love, a new family. It's completely unfair to the child. It's unjust. It's an injustice. So the idea that marriage is just about the adults is the primary problem that we face, I think, today. Children have a right to be the fruit of their parents' love, conjugal union. Marriage is that structure that God put in place so that they will be protected, provided for, cared for, educated to adulthood. When that's blown to bits, when the adults renege on that promise and destroy the family, it is an injustice to the child. The child is not an afterthought. The child is not some appendage to the marriage. The child is there as a fruit of the marriage, and the child has rights. And just like everything else in the sexual revolution, it's the child who is the biggest victim, because they have these rights, and yet no one considers their rights. Sexual revolution is based on the idea that you are free to have the sexual and romantic life that you want. That pleasure and that joy is sacrosanct above any other consideration, because that is, after all, what makes a happy life. Of course, it's a lie. But if you think about it, you cannot have the sexual revolution without no-fault divorce. You have to be able to change partners. If you're unhappy, and let's be very honest, marriage and divorce and family unit like that, a family unit, all of that is about sex. Otherwise, you have a friendship. A marriage is different from a friendship. And what's the difference? Well, it's a conjugal union. It's about a romance and what the culture calls a romance, because, of course, marriage is supposed to be a high romance. So if you don't have the easy ability to divorce, then you can't have sexual satisfaction. As soon as you're tired or bored, or as soon as one partner decides that person is tired or bored, or it has to be this magical romance always. This inability to pick up our cross, to carry our cross, and to become holy, it's not considered. And if it is, it's considered, again, even among good Catholics, to be something we do outside of having to suffer in a marriage. We could do our suffering elsewhere, but certainly we're not supposed to suffer in our love life, in our marriage. We're supposed to have a happy marriage. It's like, the vows don't say anything about what we're entitled to. Nothing. All the vows say is what we're promising to give the other person. And that self-sacrificial type of love is not popular, even in Catholic circles, even in our marriages today. And we don't realize how much we've fallen into that trap. So we have a mountain of social science evidence about the devastation of divorce. There's almost no other area of social science that is that clear. It devastates children, it devastates societies, devastates families. If it were not that divorce touched on sex, as Peter Kraft has said, it would not be allowed in this society, something that is that detrimental to the foundations of society. And yet, because it's about sex, because marriage is about sex, divorce is about sex, we allow it. we allow it and we affirm it. And it is very similar to even the abortion debate, because it's funny. I've had a lot of discussions since the book came out on social media, and you cannot bring up the issue of divorce and that it's harmful without being attacked immediately. And you're attacked by well-meaning people, but the attack is but abuse, but extreme cases. And so after a while, I'd have these adult children of divorce who come to me privately, because a lot of them are way too scared to get into these discussions on Facebook or on any social media, because they're instantly taken back to childhood almost, where it's like, oh gosh, I can't be in this. This is too difficult. And they do not need more pain around this issue. But privately, they'll say to me, this sounds so much like the abortion debate, because you cannot bring up abortion without hearing, oh, no, we can't talk about that unless we talk about the most difficult case. It's like, well, what about the vast majority? Can we at least talk about that? Oh, nope. We have got to talk about the most difficult thing. And therefore, what is the net effect of that? The net effect is that we've shut the conversation down completely. We don't talk. Now, we cannot talk about abortion with people who want to bring up the hard cases. And you cannot talk about divorce, even among Catholics, even among good Christian people. If there is any third rail, I have learned, it is you do not touch the third rail of divorce, even among good Catholics, because you might make someone feel bad. You might make someone feel guilty about their divorce. And I cannot tell you how many caveats you can put in, caveat after caveat after caveat, that yes, the church absolutely says that in case of danger, in case of extreme cruelty, you can physically separate. It doesn't matter how many times I say that. You cannot speak of divorce at all without, as one child of divorce told me, without always having to be mindful of the adult's feelings. So it always goes back to that. And that's why the children don't speak, because they were taught long ago not to. That's one of the saddest parts of this, is that in this culture of no-fault divorce, the person who is innocent automatically loses if the other spouse, who is perhaps the offending spouse, wants out. So the destruction of the family is actually in the hands of the person who wants to destroy the family, and the law will back that person up and will help that person abandon his or her family. I mean, it's shocking that you could have the children are always innocent. So you have the innocent children who are about to have their life destroyed, their family destroyed. And then you have the spouse who wants to keep his or her family intact, keep the marriage intact. And then you have the law, who is always going to be on the side of the person who wants out. No question, no retrial, nothing, no reprieve, you're done. So you have victims that are the children always, and then you have innocent abandoned spouses, and the Catechism talks about that as well, that they are purely innocent, that they are devastated, and that the evils of divorce not only introduce chaos into the family, but by default into society. And so we have a society that is set up to accommodate the destruction and the chaos that is the fallout of no-fault divorce. And if there's one way to quickly destroy a society, it is to destroy the family unit. So we're on track to do that, and we're doing it at an incredible pace. So yes, I know many spouses who were abandoned, who did not want a divorce, wanted nothing to do with it, had absolutely no recourse in the law. This is the saddest part of all. They also had very little support in the church. Most friends, most priests would say to them, you need to move on. If your spouse is no longer in love with you, or if this divorce has gone through or is going through, you probably should just move on and be happy. And yet, our church says, and St. John Paul II said, the people who stick with their vows, who are the examples of how to be faithful, even with a huge cross handed to that person, or even when the other person wants to leave and destroy the marriage, those are the people who need our support. Those are the people we hold up as heroes of fidelity. And yet the exact opposite is happening in our parishes and with our communities. We're saying, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you psychologically that you won't just move on? I mean, he's moved on. She's left. She's moved on. What's wrong with you? That's not how the church prescribes that we act in those cases. And yet that's how we're acting. That's how we're all acting. So that's another tragedy, is you've got the devastation and the victimization of the children, but you also have the abandoned spouse who is not supported in society or in our church at the moment. And we have to all examine ourselves and say, am I being supportive by saying, oh, just move on. What's wrong with you? Be happy. Find a boyfriend, or should I listen to what this person is telling me and saying, that person wants support in staying faithful to his or her vows, even when the spouse has not been faithful. And that is the best example to the children. And the church says that. JP2 said that this is the hero. But we don't believe it. We don't believe it. We just want everybody to be happy. And yet the children seeing a spouse stay faithful even when the other spouse has left goes such a long way to helping those children keep their faith and understand what fidelity really means in the darkest of times. So we need to help support those abandoned spouses as well. The good news is that many of these children, first of all, grow up and say, I will never, ever do this to my children. I will never divorce. I will find a way to make my marriage work. Redemption is found in forgiveness of the parents. So many of I have an entire chapter on how has your faith helped you to heal. And so many of them look to the sacraments and they say, I wasn't necessarily Catholic or even Christian when all this was going on in my life, but I found Christ. I found the faith. I found the sacraments. And now I'm able to take my pain somewhere. I can take it to the foot of the cross. Bishop Olmsted is very poignant and very eloquent when he says, first you have to name the pain. And this is where we are. Right now, we haven't named the pain in society with divorce. We just don't name it. So we name the pain that children are harmed, children suffer from their parents' divorce. Name it. And then Bishop Olmsted says, you take that pain once named, you take it to the cross. And there it can be redeemed. But until it's spoken, until we know what it is, how can we take it to the cross and redeem it? So a lot of these participants who are now Catholic and devout Catholics, they still live with pain. You always live with pain. You have the scar. The scar is never going to go away. But you can redeem that pain. Redemptive suffering is what we do as Catholics. We know that our suffering is not meaningless. We know that it is not wasted if we offer it in union with Christ's suffering on the cross. We know that grace has come from that offering of our sufferings. And so as long as the children can find the meaning in their suffering and they can find the way to forgiveness, there is great healing, great healing. I will tell you that some of the most amazing repair of this damage has come in the friendships that have been made in the contributors to my book who didn't know that other people like them existed. That's another shocking thing to me, is you didn't know other people like this existed. No, we didn't know people felt this way. We knew there were tons of kids of divorce out there, but I never knew someone felt this deeply about it. I never knew there was this level of pain. And then to hear that it's everywhere, that I'm not alone, I'm not a freak. They have forged these friendships which have helped in the healing, because they're lighter. You take that burden off your shoulder. I'm the only one carrying this burden. I'm now 38 years old. I'm the only person on this planet who had this bad reaction because everybody else is doing fine. There must be something wrong with me. And then to get that burden lifted, suddenly there's a lightness, there's a freedom. And so there's great healing in that, It's kind of touching a nerve, and there's something called restoredministry.com now that's out there that I just heard from this young man who, he's a child of divorce, and he is feeling he's from Steubenville, feeling very convicted about wanting to help and reach out to others. And again, it's a hidden pain, it's an isolating pain. And so this is the way to bust it open and to heal it, is by naming it, bringing it out in the open, even if it has to be anonymous. I mean, that's the weird thing. Nobody still wants to hurt their parents. You still don't want to, you love your parents. You don't want them to feel pain over your pain, but even anonymously, telling your stories, the freedom of being able to speak, it gives a lightness to their lives that they have never known before. And then they can begin to heal, and then they can begin to understand why there is so much pain and what they can do going forth to make sure that no one else feels that pain, at least in their line, in their generation, in the next generations to come. And some have turned to, some have been able to speak to their parents. Their parents are afraid too. You don't want to know that you've hurt your child that badly. You do not want to believe that. And so there's been now a new way to talk to parents about it. Even people saying, hey, I don't know if you know this, but yeah, it did hurt a lot, and then having your parents say, with no excuses, I'm sorry, I acknowledge that pain. Like, that is so healing, even those words. And I had a lot of people after the book tell me that, because I don't think I put that in the book. And what would you want your parents to say to you now? Or how could that healing be facilitated today? And they said, really, all we want, you don't need to self-flagellate. Parents don't need to, they were hurting too. But there needs to be an acknowledgement, just an acknowledgement that this was painful. No excuses, no caveats, no, but I had to, no, none of that. Just, I'm sorry, and yes, I acknowledge that your pain was real, it happened, and I'm not gonna make any excuse for that. So healing to these kids, so healing. And kids, by kids I mean they're in their 50s, some of them. But it's true, so there's great hope, but we have to stop being silent about it. That's the most important thing.